Good evening. Hopefully my audio works. It wasn't working the first day, but I think I figured that out. But who knows? Could be worse, I guess. But tonight we're going to read chapter 4. Last night, as you'll recall, we were a little flashback story of the beginning of the pandemic, um, the revelation that the Singletons had obtained powers after their exposure, and that the government was instituting quarantine zones and martial law. So tonight we start with chapter 4. Hell is other people. Matt spent those early days after the martial law setting up mesh networks and coordinating with his family through encrypted communication apps. He ensured his home battery backup was sufficiently charged each evening. Matt had been at the house doing more research and preparation for their now certain escape. By nightfall, 2 days later, the power grid began failing in sections. Matt traced the spreading darkness from his window, first street lights, then entire blocks vanishing. In their place, orange pinpricks flared across the cityscape. For now, their solar array and battery backup system were holding up. His television screen had gone blue hours ago. No one replaced by a monotone voice repeating instructions no one believed anymore. Despite the lockdown and quarantine, folks were abandoning the infrastructure that had marked modern civilization. The question at hand was it because they were dying or running? Matt was growing more concerned by the day, and they made plans. In their bedroom, Matt slid the magazine into the SIG, checked the chamber, then placed it in the bedside drawer within easy reach. Diane zipped her duffel bag bulging with orange prescription bottles and first aid supplies she'd gathered before desperate crowds had picked the pharmacies clean. So what's her next move? She asked, voice steady despite everything. Matt caught her gaze, noting the new creases around her eyes, the rigid set of her shoulders as she fought to maintain composure. We adapt, he said. Day by day, minute by minute if necessary, and we get our kids. The walls vibrated with the rhythmic thump of helicopter blades, their bedroom briefly illuminating as searchlights swept across the neighborhood. A woman's scream pierced the night raw and a primal, making Matt's hand instinctively return to the drawer. This wasn't how the world was supposed to end. Not the mushroom clouds they'd practiced drills for in school, not the rising ocean scientists had warned about for years. Instead, it was dying cell by cell, person by person, as microscopic invaders rewrote the blueprint of human existence. Matt tested each window lock, then the deadbolt on their front and back doors. A cold clarity replaced his earlier panic. Whatever crawled out from the wreckage of civilization, whatever new form of humanity emerged, would share little with the world they'd known. His family would have to navigate this alien landscape armed with nothing but instinct and whatever these strange gifts were that the virus had bestowed on them, and on those who survived its crucible. For now, they waited, but planned for the eventual fall of the now erected quarantine zones. The quarantine zones lasted exactly 17 days before the first fence was torn down. Matt watched it happen from the roof of their suburban home, binoculars trained on the distant checkpoint where a crowd of desperate people surged against the barrier like human tide. The soldiers fired warning shots first, bright muzzle flashes against the evening sky, then aimed lower as the fence buckled. Matt lowered his binoculars, his hands trembling. He couldn't bear to watch what came next, but the distant screams told him everything he needed to know. It was time to leave. He descended the ladder carefully, his mind already cataloging essentials, medicine, weapons, food, water. When he stepped into the kitchen, Diane was already packing, her movements precise and efficient. They've reached the eastern checkpoint, Matt said, his voice flat with a forced calm. She nodded without looking up. How long do we have? Hours, maybe less. It's time to go. He moved to the basement door. I'll get the emergency supplies. Can you make sure Logan has his tablets charged? He'll need them. Grab all the backups, power supplies, too. In the basement, Matt pulled dusty duffel bags from a locked cabinet. His police training had prepared him for riots, for natural disasters, but not for this creeping apocalypse that rewrote human biology. He loaded ammunition to a separate bag, checked each box methodically. The weight of the bullets felt like an admission that the world had already changed beyond recognition. When he returned upstairs, Brendan was helping Logan pack his few comfort items. The older boy looked up at his father with eyes too old for his teenage face. "Where are we going?" Brendan asked. "To get your sister and brothers," Matt replied. "Away from population centers," he hesitated, then added, "Then we're going to find a nice cabin somewhere safe and away from everyone else." Diane appeared in the doorway, her bag slung over her shoulder. The radio saying they're setting up a military blockade around every metropolitan area now. They're warning they will be completed by morning. We need to leave now. Matt sent the message to Mary and Sam. Be there soon. He couldn't wait for the reply. It was time to go. Outside, distant sirens wailed. The evening air smelled of smoke and something else, something chemical and sharp, that burned at the back of Matt's throat. National Guard helicopters circled overhead, searchlights cutting through the gathering dusk. The street was eerily quiet, most neighbors having fled days ago. Most neighbors, having fled days ago, locked themselves inside as news grew worse or passed away to isolation. They loaded the family SUV quickly, working in near silence, broken only by Logan's occasional distressed sounds. Matt watched his younger son closely, knowing how easily the chaos and break in routine could overwhelm his sensitive nervous system. He crouched beside Logan as Diane secured the last bag. "I know it's scary," Matt said softly, "but we're going somewhere quiet, where you can feel safe again. We're going to get sister first, okay?" Logan nodded, his eyes focused just past Matt's shoulder. His fingers moved rapidly over his tablet, typing out, "People bad now." "Some people are, and it's not safe to just stay here anymore. But we're going to find everyone and stay together. All of us." As they pulled away from the house, Matt tried not to think about the fact that they would likely never return. He drove carefully, avoiding main roads where barriers had been erected. Twice they had to turn back when they encountered makeshift roadblocks, not military checkpoints, but desperate civilians with guns and hollow eyes. Diane's burgeoning powers acted as an early warning system. The first real checkpoint came at the city limits. A line of armored vehicles blocked the highway, soldiers in full hazmat gear checking each vehicle. "Blood tests," they said. "Mandatory screening for infection." Matt watched the family ahead of them be separated when the father's test showed the first signs of viral presence. "Please," the man begged as soldiers dragged him toward a quarantine tent. "I feel fine. Don't take me from my family." His wife lunged after him, and the soldier struck her with the butt of his rifle. She collapsed to the pavement as her children screamed. Matt's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "Don't look," he told Brendan, but it was too late. His son's face had gone pale, jaw set in a hard line, his hands starting to glow. Matt gives his oldest boy the look, and his hands returned to normal immediately. When their turn came, Matt rolled down his window just enough to speak. "My family is healthy. No symptoms." The soldier's face was invisible behind his respirator. "Blood test or you don't pass." Matt hesitated, then slowly reached for his wallet, extracting his old police ID. "I'm transporting my family to secure location Delta 7 on Captain Reynolds' orders." He spoke with all the authority he could muster. "We've already been cleared at Checkpoint Bravo." Diane used her new power to magnify the authority of Matt's words without him knowing. The soldier studied the idea, then glanced at his clipboard. After a long moment, he stepped back and waved them through. "Jesus, Dad," Brendan whispered as they accelerated past the checkpoint. "That actually worked?" "People cling to authority in a crisis," Matt said, "and they're too overwhelmed to verify everything, but that won't work again. They'll tighten protocols." Diane taps her temple with an index finger, a small smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "Let's just say I gave his words a little extra weight, and I can do it again if we need to." They drove through the town to get to his daughter's rural home. Most of the city had become ghost zones in a matter of days. Abandoned cars littered the roads, forcing them onto shoulder lanes and sometimes across fields. By nightfall, they pulled into the gravel driveway of Mary's home. Light spilled from the windows despite widespread blackouts. Sam had finished installing a solar array similar to Matt's he'd always talked about. Matt approached the front door and knocked with the old rhythm he'd used on his daughter's bedroom door throughout her teenage years. The door cracked open to reveal Sam gripping a Louisville slugger, his German shepherd Silver baring teeth at the strangers. Mary appeared behind her husband, her face crumpling at the sight of her family. A woman's voice cut through the tense silence crackling from the ham radio inside. We're estimating 70% casualties in major cities, with rural infection rates following the same pattern, but lagging by approximately. Sam lowered the bat as Mary pushed past him, collapsing into her father's embrace. Matt gave a weak smile over his daughter's shoulders. Sorry to crash the apocalypse party without calling first. You're late, she said, sobbing. Sorry, traffic was ridiculous, Matt replied as he kissed his daughter's forehead. The first step in this journey had been made. Matt had his kids under one roof now. Now to find Diane's. That night, as his family finally succumbed to exhausted sleep, Matt sat by the window with his gun across his lap. The silence of the world was deafening. No cars, no planes, no distant music or human voices. Just the wind, and occasionally far away a scream that might have been a human or animal. Dawn broke over a silent world as they hunched around Mary's dining room table, tracing routes on faded road atlas. Matt's finger followed the blue lines of the back roads toward Tempe, deliberately avoiding the thick red arteries of highways. Too many variables on interstates, he murmured, circling a rural detour. Roadblocks, ambushes, military checkpoints. Mary reached for her coffee pot, her fingers trembling slightly. A blue spark arced between her hand and the metal handle, making her flinch back. Silver, who'd been dozing in a corner, scrambled to his feet with a yelp and darted into the next room. Dad, she whispered, staring at her fingertips, where tiny electrical currents still danced. 1,000 miles in a metal vehicle? She left the thought unfinished, glancing toward the window where their packed SUV waited. Matt reached across the table, clasped Mary's trembling hands between both of his, ignoring the static shock that jumped between them. His weathered face softened, eyes crinkling at the corners with determined affection. Mary, we aren't leaving you behind, even if we have to wrap you in rubber gloves and duct tape you into a hazmat suit, he said, his voice low and steady, the same tone he'd used to chase away her childhood nightmares. Family stays together, especially now. Sam laid his palm over the joined hands of his father-in-law and wife. His eyes found Mary's, holding her gaze steady. We'll make it through this journey, he said quietly, then glanced toward the corner where the German shepherd had retreated. It's Silver that concerns me. At his age, a trip with no fixed endpoint. His voice trailed off as he watched the dog's labored breathing. But the thought of abandoning you here alone is unbearable. Matt opens his mouth, then closes it. He rubs his face with both hands. He should be with family when he passes. With you, but Christ, Sam, I don't know if we can afford the extra weight, the stops. He trails off, looking at the old dog with a mixture of tenderness and calculation that makes him hate himself a little. He's coming. We can make it work. The rest of humanity may be lost, but we aren't, Mary says defiantly. Sam nodded and returned to inventorying their supplies on a yellow legal pad. We've got maybe 3 days of food and water, 2 full tanks of gas between the vehicles. Not enough. Matt glanced toward the neighboring properties. Those houses? Is anyone left? Abandoned in the first wave, Sam replied, or worse. We should check them before we leave. As the sun began its descent, Sam, Matt, and Brendan methodically searched the neighboring houses. Their efforts yielded a week's worth of canned goods, several gallons of bottled water, and in the garage of a ranch-style home 3 doors down, a cache of gasoline containers, clearly meant for a generator in a small enclosed trailer. But by nightfall, the combined Singletons and Early families had secured enough provisions to continue their journey. If supplies ran low, Matt knew that they could always siphon fuel from the countless abandoned vehicles now littered across every road. In the morning, they left the comfort of the rural home of the Earleys and continued through a landscape transformed by absence. Abandoned vehicles, empty buildings stood as monuments to the vanished majority of humanity. They passed through towns where the only signs of life were desperate messages painted on walls: helpless, or no sick here, or simply goodbye. By the fourth day of slow moving travel, they saw their first full inhuman mutation. A man staggering along the highway, his skin thickened into gray plates along his arms. His eyes filmed over white as he turned as they passed, reaching out with elongated fingers, his mouth opening to reveal teeth that had fused into a solid ridge of bone. Don't stop, Diane whispered, though Matt had no intention of doing so. Just drive, his thoughts aren't safe. In the rearview mirror, Matt watched the figure grow smaller until it disappeared from view. One of the first glimpses of what humanity was becoming in the ashes of civilization's collapse. Matt exhaled slowly, relief washing over him, that his children remained unchanged, then immediately hated himself for the thought. What made that poor bastard any less worthy of his humanity? Matt's stomach churned with disgust as his own instinctive prejudice, even as the protective father in him whispered that he'd accept any horror if it meant keeping his family safe and normal. The journey stretched before them like an endless riddle. Every metropolitan area, large town they skirted added miles to their route, and Matt knew that detours would multiply if that mutated figure was any indication of what awaited them, especially those who might possess both powers and rage. They couldn't afford a single careless moment. Caution wasn't just advisable anymore. It was the only currency that would keep them alive. I'm going to go ahead and go on to chapter 5 because we read that one really fast. I guess I didn't realize how short that chapter was when I wrote it. But technically, when I wrote it the first time, chapters 3 and 4 were one chapter. Then I decided to break it up. Chapter 5: The Crucible. While the Singleton family fled westward with the Earlys, Archie Lee found himself embarking on a different kind of odyssey. The only thing more suffocating than Tennessee in early summer was the stench of 2 dozen mutants corralled under razor wire, sweating out the dregs of their former lives. A month had passed since its evaluation night, since the quarantines began, yet it felt like years. Archie hadn't been blackbagged like the poor bastards on the news feed. No unmarked vans, no hazmat goons. Instead, he landed here, in what might be a government-sanctioned hell, or just some power-hungry general's pet project. The Helljumper's name, even the name, reeked of desperate bravado. The simple fact that they were using a military base for operations should have been a clue, but at this point, Archie was in too deep. The sprawling education complex, with its elementary, middle, and high schools cloistered together like fortified outposts, offered better containment than any military installation. Surrounding apartment blocks provided ready-made barracks, while the private airstrip just minutes away completed their strategic foothold, perfect for processing large numbers with minimal exposure. Their so-called boot camp squatted on the remains of the high school stadium, guard towers jutting from decaying bleachers where cheerleaders once stood. Below the oval track no longer measured athletic Below, the oval track no longer measured athletic achievement, but human breaking points. Its surface, already darkened with bodily fluids, as after just 3 laps had reduced the newest recruits to retching wrecks. Archie Lee stood at attention, or as close to it as his spasming legs allowed. He tried to keep the breathing shallow to avoid sucking in the ripe tang of ammonia that hung over the field like a fog. Part of him wanted to run, just bolt for the fence and take his chances, while another part recognized the raw potential surrounding him. These people could be weapons or allies. All around him, the others blinked and twitched, eyeing each other with the paranoia of caged animals. The only thing more dangerous than the guards with their stun batons were the recruits themselves, himself included. General Hawk's metals clanged against his dress uniform with each step, catching sunlight like metal fragments at a blast site. His jaw muscles twitched beneath skin pulled taut over cheekbones. When his gaze locked on a recruit who had shifted position, the man froze mid-movement. 3 inches of white mustache extended precisely from each side of his thin lips. Every hair aligned as if magnetized, not a single one disturbed, despite the sweat-heavy breeze that had made everyone else's clothing stick to their skin. Hawk's voice sliced through the heat like a bayonet through flesh. You are the last goddamn argument for human survival. Spittle flew from his lips, catching sunlight as it spattered across the nearest recruit's face. You are the spear point. He drove his riding crop into the palm with a crack that made three recruits flinch. The vanguard. Another crack, harder and drawing blood from his own hand. The fucking line between civilization and total genetic collapse. The silence that followed felt like a grenade with a pin pulled. Someone's stomach gurgled. Hawk's eyes found the source instantly, boring into the man with such ferocity that Archie swore he could smell the recruit's fear. Hawk lunged forward, riding crop whistling through the air, stopping a millimeter from the offender's eyes. If you fail, he whispered, suddenly deadly quiet, extinction is too merciful for what you deserve. Is that understood? The reply was strangled chorus. The reply was a strangled chorus of yes, sir, broken by dry heaves and one poorly timed fart. Hawk turned, lips curled into something close to satisfaction. Hawk's face twisted into something barely human. 2 fucking weeks. Each word landed like artillery fire. You will run until your lungs collapse. You will fight until your bones splinter. You will bleed until you're dry and crawl through your own filth until I say otherwise. He leaned in so close to Archie that he could count the burst capillaries in his eyes. The only thing that matters is whether you leave here alive and useful. Anything less, he grabbed the nearest recruit by the throat, squeezing just enough to make the man's eyes bulge. And I'll personally mulch your corpse to fertilize the next batch. He jerked his head toward the sideline where 2 instructors waited. The first was a woman whose platinum hair, so bleached that it appeared almost blue under the merciless sun, framed a face carved from winter granite. Her eyes, the pale blue of the gas flame's hottest point, swept across the recruits with clinical detachment. She wore a navy tracksuit with a crimson piping over a matte black Kevlar vest, zipped only halfway as if daring someone to target her exposed throat. When she shifted her weight, the morning dew beneath her steel-toe combat boots audibly crisped to frost, leaving perfect crystalline footprints that evaporated in seconds. Archie recognized her instantly. Amber, the same one who threatened to turn his blood into slush while jamming a thermometer probe under his tongue during intake. The other was a squat, brick-faced man in desert-worn camo pants and a sweat-stained black tank top that strained against his torso like shrink wrap on meat. His arms hung at awkward angles from his body, too massive to rest naturally at his sides, each bicep carved with veins that pulsed visibly with every heartbeat. His neck had all but disappeared into trapezius muscles that formed a shelf behind his ears, and his head shaved gleamed with a perpetual sheen of sweat that caught the light as he scanned the recruits with small, deep-set eyes. Archie heard one of the recruits behind him whisper, "That's Brick. Rumor is he can bench press a truck or a coffin if you piss him off." A handful of guards ringed the field, their visors down, batons already humming with anticipation. Archie tried not to make eye contact. The last time he disrespected one of them, he'd spent the night with his face in a bucket of ice, his hands zip-tied behind his knees. Hawk finished his lap, stepped in front of the line, eyes raking over each recruit like he was picking out produce. "Some of you think you're special," he sneered. "Some of you probably were before the world went septic. Let me disabuse you of that delusion." He pointed to the recruit on Archie's left, a wiry Asian man with a face that belonged to a forensic sketch, all sharp angles and hollow shadows where cheekbones should have been. "You, Jones, step forward." The man did, every movement coiled with nervous energy like a spring compressed to its breaking point. His nostrils flared, expanding to twice their normal size, and Archie could almost feel him cataloging every scent on the field. Copper tang of blood from split lips, the ammonia reek of fear, sweat, and even the faint ozone burn of Amber's power lingering in the air. "Jones," Hawk said, his voice scraping like a knife against bone, "tell these mutants what you can do." Jones hesitated, eyes darting from face to face as if reading invisible text. Boone spoke in a clipped monotone that reminded Archie of a malfunctioning GPS. Enhanced sensory processing, vision, olfaction, audition. Can identify threats by smell, even through containment. Can track targets for miles through rain, smoke, or sewage. His left eye twitched twice. Also, cannot turn it off. Ever. Good, Hawk grunted. Means if you screw up, you'll see it coming from a mile away. He turned to the next, a tall, olive-skinned man with a smirk that looked stapled to his face. The recruit stood at parade rest, shoulders relaxed despite the tension crackling through the air. A thin scar bisected his left eyebrow, giving him a perpetually quizzical expression that clashed with his confident stance. Barnes, Tian, Hawk said, led the name snapping like a flag in the high wind. Let's hear it. Variable mass and density, sir, Tian said, voice rolling with the warm cadence of coastal Cuba. His teeth flashed white against the sun-darkened skin. Can be as light as a hummingbird or as heavy as a bank vault. Makes the ground crack when I want to. He flexed his fingers, knuckles popping like distant gunfire. Not so good for dating, but great for smashing heads. A ripple of sea laughed through the quickly when Hawk narrowed to gunmetal slits. He let the silence stretch until it felt like a physical weight before moving on. Ortega, he barked. A woman with dark hair yanked back in a perfect regulation bun stepped forward. Her shoulders squared with military precision, forearms corded with muscle beneath the skin that had seen enough sun to bronze not burn. The fabric of her standard issue shirt strained slightly across her chest and biceps, and the veins in her neck stood out like blue rivers on a topographical map when she spoke. Her dry line could have cut glass. She looked like she could break Archie in half and then file her nails with the pieces. Superhuman speed and strength, she reported, voice clipped and efficient. Maxed at 200% baseline. Maximum top time at top speed, 1 hour and 20 minutes. Recovery rate within 24 hours, sir. Hawk pivoted, jabbing a finger at the man whose limbs twitched with microscopic tremors, like a tuning fork struck too hard. The recruit's pupils dilated and contracted in rapid pulses, his nostrils flaring with each shallow breath as if constantly sampling the air. Name's Smith, sir, the recruit said, voice flat as sun-baked concrete. His jaw barely moved when he spoke, his teeth clenched tight enough to crack molars. Short-range power detected, 20-foot radius, nothing gets in without me knowing, can feel the electrical signature of hidden weapons, sense the corrupted proteins and mutated DNA, even taste the chemical markers of fear or aggression on my tongue. Hawk pivoted, his boots heel grinding into the dirt. Just who the hell do you think you are? He snarled at the next recruit. She stood ramrod straight, a woman with hair cropped so severely it resembled polished gunmetal under the harsh lights. Her face was all angles, cheekbones that could cut glass, jaw clenched tight enough to crack walnuts, lips pressed into bloodless line. Though the regulation uniform concealed most of her athletic frame, the tendons in her neck stood out like steel cables when she answered. Voice flat as a bullet trajectory. Maze, mental manipulation up to 3 targets at once. Her eyes, the color of spent shell casings, never blinked, never wavered, giving nothing away about the calculation surely running behind them. Hawk's eyes crawled down the line, stopping at each recruit like a snake tasting possible prey, before finally coiling around Archie. Lee? The world the word fell between them like a spent shell casing. They're calling you Major now, aren't they? His voice dropped and vibrating in Archie's ribcage. A title you've yet to earn. We've all witnessed your little demonstration earlier. Why don't you tell everyone exactly what you can do? Archie clenched his jaw until a dull ache spread through his molars. The familiar heat of anger pooled at the base of his skull, making pebbles at his feet tremble almost imperceptibly. Telekinetic propulsion, sir. Can move myself and other objects with force of will, create personal force fields of telekinetic energy. Works best when angry, which is most of the time. Hawk's withered face cracked into a smile that never reached his eyes, which remained cold and calculating as a sniper scope. Noted. His teeth gleamed like bone fragments in the harsh sunlight. If I ever need to launch a grenade into the neighbor's yard, you'll be my first call. Then, like a bomb detonating in slow motion, the rest of the recruits crawled forward. Huge farm boy, he looked like he'd been raised on radioactive beef, Fletcher density, bulletproof at close range, and a pale, almost featureless teenager who barely looked up from the ground. Holt, unknown mutation still being observed. When the parade of power ended, General Hawk clapped his hands. Once. The sound was like a rifle crack. Get them running, he barked. The instructors moved in. You will sprint the track, Amber announced, voice like a glacier. Cal- calving. You will not stop until the whistle blows. If you fall, you get up. If you vomit, do it while moving. If you collapse, the guards will drag you and you will thank them for the privilege. Do you understand? Archie's knees wanted to buckle just hearing it, but he managed to nod. The first lap was a blur of elbows and curses. By the second, the air turned syrup thick, and sweat stung his eyes. Barnes pulled ahead almost immediately, gliding over the ground with uncanny precision. Ortega and Tiant fell in behind, trading insults like old rivals. Archie kept his head down and pushed, blood hammering in his ears. Maze jogged beside him for a stretch, face blank. She didn't look at him, but he felt a prickling at the base of his skull, like a memory trying to claw its way out. He tried to ignore it, but her presence was a cold draft up his spine. Halfway through the fifth lap, someone screamed behind him. Archie risked a glance. The farm boy, his face had planted into the dirt, arms twitching. Two guards yanked him up by the elbows and assisted his progress by half dragging, half shoving him around the curve. Focus forward, Amber barked, suddenly beside him. Her breath frosted the air even in the 90-degree heat. Only the weak look back. He almost snapped, almost told her where to shove it, but thought better. Instead, he gritted his teeth and ran. Three recruits collapsed before the whistle. The guards dumped them into the heap by the goalpost where Dr. Scrape and a pair of aides hovered with IV bags and what looked suspiciously like jumper cables. The rest of the day was a blur of violence, hand-to-hand drills in a sun-baked parking lot, weapons training with live ammunition, practical applications of powers that left turf cratered and smoldered. Tiant, Tiant flattened a steel barrel with one punch. Ortega hurled a medicine ball through a cinder block wall. Maze made two recruits slap each other for 10 minutes before Amber broke the spell by icing their feet to the ground. By dusk, Archie's entire body vibrated with exhaustion. He limped toward the barracks, every muscle threatening mutiny. As he crossed the field, a chunk of ice smashed into the ground inches from his boot. He looked up. Amber stood 10 feet away, arms crossed, her expression somewhere between boredom and disdain. You lost focus, she said, voice glacial. Archie scowled. I was about to collapse. Sue me. You're here to survive, not make excuses. Next time I freeze your tongue to your skull. He didn't doubt her. Inside the barracks, Archie found his bunk, one of the 50 stacked three high, all stained with the ghost of the previous occupants. He flopped down and stared at the cracked ceiling, the day's events replaying in painful detail. Three bunks over, Barnes lay with his eyes closed, breathing so shallow it was almost invisible. You did good, Lee, he muttered, voice thin. Most don't make it this far. Archie grunted. Don't plan to stick around forever. Barnes smiled, eyes still closed. Nobody does. But while you're here, watch Maze. She likes to play games. Why tell me? A shrug barely perceptible. Because she's already inside your head. I can smell the cortisol from here. Archie stared at the ceiling until the lights snapped off, plunging the room into darkness. Sleep was impossible, but eventually he drifted. Dreams of flying gave way to dreams of falling. Day two was worse. Day two began with a whistle at 0400 and ended, if you could call it an ending, when they collapsed in the barracks at midnight. Bones jelly, teeth vibrating from the inside out. There was no warm up, no breakfast, not even time for a piss. They were driven straight from their bunks, skulls still fogged with nightmare residue, out into the half-lit world of Payne General Hawk and his ice-bitch protege prepared for them. First casualty happened before sunrise. A girl with bleached blonde hair and a skittery voice tripped on the live fire course and didn't get up. A slug took her below the rib cage. She folded and sounded like with a sound like a collapsing tent. Two guards in yellow slickers were on her before the blood had fully soaked the ground. They carried her off, leaving only a thin thread in the mud as the lesson to the rest. Archie gagged but kept moving. Even from 20 yards away, he could see the boredom in the guards' faces. Death was just cleanup to them. Keep your head down and your ass lower, Bond hissed behind him, voice almost lost in the rattle of machine gun fire overhead. Archie obeyed. Bond's senses were freakily acute. He could tell the angle of the bullet by how the air whistled a few yards ahead. Tiant hit the dirt and then incredibly rolled to the side just as a trip mine vaporized the patch he'd been lying on. Force spun him twice before he landed smiling, teeth red with blood. Good one, Tiant croaked, then spat the loose tooth into the grass. He was on his feet a second later, ducking to the next barricade like nothing had happened. Ortega and Smith stuck together, vaulting over a chest-high wall in perfect synchronization. Archie envied them. They moved like they'd been built for this, like muscle memory was the only memory that mattered anymore. Maze took her time, weaving through the chaos with an almost dainty precision. She didn't run so much as glide, barely breaking a sweat. Archie caught her eye once as she crawled under razor wire, and for an instant her blank expression flickered something like contempt, or maybe just boredom. He didn't know which was worse. At the finish line, Amber waited with arms folded. She didn't need to say anything. The ice forming at her boots made her opinion clear. Archie stumbled in, lungs on fire, and collapsed at her feet. Pathetic, Amber said, but her voice was soft, almost sympathetic. She tapped a timer on her wrist and turned away, leaving Archie sprawled on the turf. The next exercise was worse. They lined up single file and were handed lengths of rebar. Close quarters combat, barked the brick-faced instructor. No powers, just violence. He scanned the line, then grinned, revealing a mouthful of gold fillings. Winners eat, losers don't. Barnes went first, paired up against a hulking slab of a man who looked like he'd been chiseled out of pure hate. The fight lasted all of 3 seconds. Barnes ducked the first swing, came up under the guy's chin, and rammed the rebar through his left cheek. Blood fountained. The man tried to scream, but only bubbles came out. Barnes wiped his hands on his pants, took a step back. The guards rushed in and dragged the wounded man away and patched the cheek with a staple gun. Archie was next. His opponent was a woman half his size, but the look in her eye said she'd kill him and enjoy every second. The fight was a blur. She moved fast, tagging him twice across the ribs before he even got his weapon up. Archie stumbled and reeled and almost let his power off the leash. The last second, he remembered the rules, clenched his teeth, and swung hard. Rebar caught her across the knee. She went down, still swinging. Archie almost admired her until she sank her teeth into his ankle. He yelped. She held on, feral, until Archie stomped her in the face. Something cracked. She released him and spit out a chunk of his pant leg and grinned up at him, blood and all. They both lost, apparently, because neither got a meal. They sat in the dust, panting, and waited for the next humiliation. The rest of the day was a rotating cycle of violence. Every hour, they lost another recruit. Some were carted off by medical staff, others just didn't get back up. At dinner, the chow hall was half full as it had been at breakfast. Nobody made eye. Even Tiant looked shaken, and Archie had begun to suspect nothing could rattle that man. After dinner came power demonstrations. General Hawk led them to the concrete bunker at the edge of the field, where the surviving recruits were lined up along a firing range. Each was handed a weapon and told to amplify your asset if you want to see tomorrow. Failure meant expulsion. Expulsion meant, well. Barnes went first, sighting down the barrel of an assault rifle. He took one sniff and aimed at a series of hidden targets behind a barricade. Each shot rang out with surgical precision. When he finished, Hawk simply nodded. Ortega followed, launching a football over the range, shattering the distant drone with a single throw. Honk grunted approval. Efficient. Tiant was told to pick up a cinder block and squeeze. He did. The block disintegrated into powder, coating the nearest instructor in gray dust. Tiant laughed, then sobered, when Hawk didn't. Smith demonstrated his detection ability by listing every hidden object, mutation, and weapon in 50-yard radius. Mays simply stared at the guard until the man dropped his baton and walked off the range, glassy-eyed. Archie's turn came last. Hawk fixed him with a wolfish smile. Show us your flight, Lee. Archie inhaled, summoned every ounce of willpower, and pushed. The air shimmered like heat waves off summer asphalt, molecules visibly distorting around his body as he rose a foot off the ground. Then he launched skyward a human missile, the G-force flattening his cheeks, pulling his lips into a grimace. He banked hard left, the world blurring beneath him, and descended on one of the guards with his right elbow extended. The impact made a sickening crack that reverberated through Archie's bones. Without pausing, he snatched up a jagged chunk of concrete on the size of a microwave, muscles straining against its weight. Before his powers took over, he rocketed upward again, climbing 100 feet into the azure sky, then released the concrete, simultaneously focusing his kinetic energy into the falling mass. It accelerated downward with an impossible speed, striking the center of the field with a thunderous impact that sent mud and debris exploding outward in a perfect circle. The concussion wave rippled across the ground, knocking recruits and guards alike off their feet like bowling pins. Archie descended slowly now, controlling his fall until he touched down with a soft thud directly at Hawk's mud splattered boots. Acceptable, Hawk said, and moved on. Not all were so lucky. Pale boy blah, a pale boy with trembling hands failed to manifest anything. Hawk didn't even blink. He gestured and the guards led the boy away, his cries fading into the humid air. After the trial, they were herded into the medical barracks for evaluation. Here, Archie saw the worst of it. A boy barely old enough to shave was strapped to a gurney, a thick rubber tourniquet biting into his arm. Dr. Scrape hovered over him, drawing blood with an enormous syringe. The boy's skin knitted together as soon as the needle withdrew, but Scrape just plunged it in again. Regenerative type, Scrape mused, glancing at the clipboard. Useful, but let's see how far we can push it. He nodded at the nurse, who produced a scalpel and dragged it across the boy's other arms. Flesh split, then healed in seconds. Archie watched, sickened as the process repeated. Each time the cuts took a little longer to close. Sweat poured down the boy's face, eyes glazed. His eyes glazed. Barnes whispered in Archie's ear, "They'll run him until the tank's empty. If he survives, he's a weapon. If he doesn't," Archie finished the thought, "he's a cautionary tale." The night infiltration was the last straw for most. Hawk lined them up at the edge of a marshy woodland and handed out night vision goggles. Objective: recover the flag at the far end of the woods. Opposing team, live guards with rubber bullets, powers permitted. Failures will be penalized. Archie considered launching himself skyward, muscles already tensing for takeoff. He could soar above the tangled canopy, a human missile cutting through the night air, and snatch the flag in seconds. Then he spotted them. Matte black quadcopters hovering in the darkness, their thermal cameras sweeping the terrain in methodical patterns. Flight would make him an easy target silhouetted against the stars. He'd have to rely on a secondary ability, those short, crackling bursts of telekinesis that could snap a branch or hurl a stone, but lacked the sustained power of his aerial mastery. He would need to rely on a team approach here, though the thought made his stomach knot. These people weren't allies. They were competition, threats. Yet going solo was suicide. Archie's jaw tightened as he weighed his options. Trust the same recruits who'd gladly watch him bleed out if it meant their advancement, or face certain failure alone. Neither choice felt right. Neither felt survivable. Maze's eyes caught Archie's in the darkness. She nodded once, then jerked her chin towards Barn. A silent agreement had formed between them. 10 feet away, Tiant grabbed Ortega's sleeve and pulled her into the shadows. Smith just disappeared into the trees without looking back, his fingers tapping against his temple. Archie's boot sank ankle deep into something that squelched. The mosquito whine filled his ears, punctuated by the snap of a branch under Barnes' foot. His shin cracked against a fallen log, sending his lightning up his leg. He bit his tongue to keep from cursing. 3 steps later, his ankle twisted in a hidden hole. 5 more, and a tripwire caught his boot, nearly sending him face first into a bed of thorns. By the time they'd gone 50 yards, his left forearm was bleeding from a branch he never saw coming. The guards materialized like ghosts from behind every twisted trunk and mossy stump, their night vision goggles giving them insectoid-like appearances in the darkness. The metallic click of tasers being unarmed and the hollow thunk of rubber bullets being chambered echoed through the undergrowth. At one point, a beam of white light sliced through the fog, carving a path between the rotting leaves. Archie pressed his cheek against the damp earth, feeling the pulse throb against the soil as twigs dug into his ribs. He caught a glimpse of Maze beside him, her face a tribal mask of dried mud, determination, eyes glittering like wet stones in a riverbed, her breath making tiny clouds in the night air. Maze's breath tickled Archie's ear, her lips so close he could feel the warmth. "Left," she whispered, the word barely audible over the squelch of mud beneath them. Archie rolled, feeling wet leaves paste themselves to his neck as the tranquilizer sliced through the space his head had occupied, its metal tip glinting momentarily in the shaft of moonlight before disappearing into the underbrush with a soft thwack. Blah, blah. The guard's eyes locked with Maze's through night vision goggles, his pupils dilated, then fixed. His mouth went slack without a word. He pivoted mechanically toward his partner, raised his weapon, and squeezed the trigger. Dart hissed through the darkness. His partner crumpled mid-stride, a surprised grunt escaping his lips. Guard pressed the barrel against his own temple, thwack. Two soft thuds followed in quick succession. Archie felt the vibration through the mud as they crawled past the fallen bodies, deeper into the woods where shadows swallowed their silhouettes. Barnes led them through a thicket where thorns caught at their fatigues like desperate fingers. His nostrils flared, catching scents invisible to the others, eyes wide, unblinking as an owl's. He froze mid-step, one mud-caked boot hovering above the ground, dropped to a crouch so quickly his knees made no sound. His right hand shot out, three fingers splayed in warning, then pointed ahead to where Tiant's massive silhouette bulldozed through the trees, snapping twigs that sounded like gunshots in the midnight stillness. Archie spotted the trap, a 6-foot pit disguised under a lattice of fresh-cut branches and scattered pine needles, its edges too geometrically perfect to be natural. His mouth opened to shout a warning, but it was too late. Tiant's weight crashed through the camouflage with a sickening crack of splintering wood. For a suspended moment, his arms windmilled against the darkness. Then he dropped from view with a muffled curse, the hollow thud of a body meeting earth. Maze's lips curled upward, her teeth gleaming white in the darkness as she let out a short, cruel laugh that fogged the air between them. Then she slithered forward on her belly, leaving a snail's trail in the damp soil. You're cold, Archie muttered. May shot him a look. Only the strong survive. They reached the clearing where the flag hung from a pole in the center. At least two guards circled it, their laser sights carving lines in the dark. Barnes signals and Mage crept forward on her stomach. Archie followed, every sense screaming. At the last moment, Maze darted up, eyes flashing. The nearest guard froze mid-stride, his pupils dilating to black pools. His rifle clattered to the mud as his fingers tore his tactical vest, ripping the buckles free. Sweat gleamed on his exposed chest as he lunged at his partner, a feral growl escaping his throat. She screamed as he clawed at her goggles, his nails drawing blood across her temple. Her taser cracked blue lightning into his ribs, his body convulsing as he collapsed. Before she could pivot, Bond materialized from the shadows behind her. Forearm. Girls. Baby dog. Hey, hush. Bond materialized from the shadows behind her, his forearm crushing her windpipe in a vice grip. Her boots kicked frantically at empty air, fingers scrabbling uselessly. Really? Really? Ma'am. Shh. Her boots kicked frantically at empty air, fingers scrabbling uselessly at his arm until her eyes rolled back, and she dropped like a stone. In the confusion, Archie dashed for the flag. Bullets snapped the air, but he lunged, grabbed the nylon, and tumbled to the ground. Barnes covered him as May scrambled up, face flushed with triumph. They made it back to the starting line, battered but intact. Hawk awaited, stone-faced. Smith is unconscious, Hawk announced, voice flat. I have no idea where Ortega is currently. Tiant is wounded. Only you three completed the objective. Now you may take your spoils and get some chow and rest. Archie Barnes and May snapped to attention, right arms rigid at their foreheads. Hawk acknowledged with a curt jerk of his chin before turning away. May smiled, but there was no warmth to it. In the night barracks, Archie confronted her. You set Tiant up. You knew that pit was there. And what the hell happened to Ortega? Was that you too? May shrugged, unfazed. He slowed us down. You don't win by dragging dead weight. Ortega wasn't mean. Maybe she was too busy trying to save him, Tiant, but maybe she got lost. I honestly don't care. Barnes said nothing, but Archie saw a flash of something, anger maybe in his eyes. A week passed. Every day fewer recruits, every day more pain, but a strange camaraderie formed among survivors. Barnes and Archie became inseparable. Tiant, after being pulled from the pit, had stitched up, fell in with him. Ortega joined, impressed by their survival. Smith decided that being in the team was more important to his long-term survival than trying to solo everything. Mays remained an outsider, respected but never trusted. On the final day, Hawk lined them up at the 50-yard line. "You are hell jumpers," he said. "You will kill or die as one unit, but only one team gets the good assignment." He gestured. 12 guards tossed weapons to the ground. "Last test. Only 5 can win." The fight was ugly. Tiant locked himself with closest guard. He dodged and jabbed a baton in Tiant's gut. Ortega used her speed to knock that guard and the next off their feet. Mays caught one in a headlock and squeezed until she went limp. Bonds circled another guard, making a quick assessment and tagging him in the temple with a stun baton. Archie used his powers, lifting 2 guards into the air, hurling them into the scrum. Jones moved with precision, taking out 2 more guards with her roundhouse kicks and throat punches. 10 more guards appeared this time with rifles and tried to begin peppering the group with rubber bullets. After the group took them out, 20 more came, this time using their powers, hitting the recruits with everything imaginable. A blast of crackling blue energy caught Ortega mid-stride, arcing across her chest like electric spiderwebs. Her eyes rolled back, showing whites, and her limbs went rigid before she crumpled face first into the mud with a wet slap. Blood trickled from her left nostril as she lay motionless, fingers still twitching. Around her, the others moved with mechanical precision, Tiant crushing windpipes with calculated pressure, Barnes and Smith weaving through blind spots like a ghost, and Mays locking eyes with opponents who suddenly turned their weapons on themselves. In the end, only Archie, Smith, Bond, Tiant, Talita, and Mays stood. "Hawk Watch, please, congratulations. You made the cut." Barnes grinned bloodily but happily. "What do we call ourselves?" he asked Archie. Archie wiped his mouth, tasted iron, and said, "Hellhounds." It stuck. And that is chapter 5. And I realized that I changed names for whatever damn reason in the middle of it. But there's several instances where it says Barnes and it should say Bond, but that's my fault. Brain obviously farted when I did that chapter. But that is everything. And I appreciate anybody that came in. Thanks for watching. And I will see you again tomorrow night for chapter 6. Good night.